our cultural mindset is your life is over. You no longer have value because you can't have kids. You're not arm candy anymore. You don't look like the 15-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And women take that on because we're so used to being shamed and not being listened to. And our
Yes.
stories are so important. And it is so important for a woman to know that she's heard, to have a witness to the story. That's where the healing takes place. And our medical visits have turned into 5 minutes in a prescription, because that's how long it takes to get a code to put in your chart so that you'll get paid. And most women, that the studies they've done have showed that a full 50% or more of women never fill those prescriptions because they're not sure it's the right thing. They know they haven't been heard, so they're not sure they should be doing this. So having someone to hear your stories, and we should be hearing each other's stories, because as women, we educate each other about what pregnancy is like, what menopause is like, what it's like to get your period, whether it's the curse or whether it's something else. So, and that mindset makes a huge difference.
In today's busy world, how can we find the inspiration, knowledge, and energy to live a healthy and empowered life? If we balance and harmonize our mind, exercise our body, live according to the laws of nature, and connect to spirit, can we find a way to heal, become our authentic self, and live our purpose with love? I am your hostess, Amy Fournier, and welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite. Welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. You know, whether you're a man or a woman, we all go through phases of our life, right? In fact, there's something called rites of passages, and there's different ones. There's rites of passages that we go through that are pretty much physical, and then there's cultural rites of passage. The physical rites of passage are also known as the blood mysteries, the women's mysteries, and they're like our birth, our menarche, which is our first period, our first sexual experience is a rite of passage, then pregnancy is a rite of passage, and remember, that can be without actually having a physical baby. It can be any kind of gestation and creation that you have in your life as a creator, and then menopause, and then ultimately death. And these rites of passages were things that culturally all cultures would revere and acknowledge as important phases in people's mind, body, spirit, life, and generational information that would be passed on. And it's something that we don't really practice in our modern day and age. That's why I'm so thrilled to share with you the guest on my show today, Susan Wilson. She's a Yale-educated certified nurse midwife with 45 years and counting experience guiding all phases of women's health. She's actually spent the last 25 years working exclusively with women in their menopausal transition, so that also includes the perimenopausal, which is the premenopausal stage. She practices in the Hudson Valley of New York, and her new book, which I love and I reference many times in the episode, Making Sense of Menopause, Harnessing the Power and Potency of Your Wisdom Years, really helps us reframe this very powerful stage in our life that all women, if blessed to live long enough, get to, which is menopause. But also, it talks about these different stages of a woman's life. Again, we're not taught this stuff because our mothers weren't taught this stuff, and our grandmothers probably weren't taught this stuff. If you go back maybe 4 or 5 generations, they were, but pretty much current society lost this generational passage of rights and knowledge and wisdom that we're now suffering from. Susan talks about how cultures that actually respect the getting older process and the people that are in their wise years actually experience less unwanted menopausal symptoms. It's amazing. We talk about so many fascinating things and empowering things in the episode, like how there's so much confusion as to what menopause is about and how it's not something that you necessarily have to dread or the end of something, but rather the beginning of a new phase of your life. Yes, you might not be able to conceive a physical child, but you're able to now conceive something else and create your true authentic self. In fact, you have different estrogen in your body, which increases at the time of menopause, while the other one decreases. You probably didn't know that. I didn't know that. I always just heard estrogen decreases when you hit menopause. Well, guess what? Another estrogen increases, which increases your power in different capacities. So Susan's message is very encouraging and empowering. And we talk about how we learn from the elders with our stories and the role of layering shame and secrets in our culture and how that leads to all kinds of problems. The role of epigenetics and how we live and think and our expectations culturally and how they can be actualized in our actual experience. We talk about the phases of our lives and how important it is for how you're living now, no matter how old you are listening to this. You might be 25 and, well, I don't want to hear a podcast on menopause. Well, guess what? Send this to your 25-year-old daughter or your friend, because how she's living now is going to influence directly how she experiences menopause later. I'll say that again. How you're living now will determine how you live later. So it's never too late. And it's very important, and it all matters. Susan also explains to us the role of generational trauma and how DNA is actually affected in the womb and passed on through generations. And we talk about body shame and how, to Susan's term, we can be wired for stress, and women can pass on this stress physiology to the unborn baby, and it goes through generations. Susan educates us on the grandmother hypothesis and the role of body trust and honoring your needs in the natural cycles, the need for diversity in all of life, and respect for that diverse nature of all of the beings. She talks about how she encourages people to have a good for me list and how important joy is in experiencing pleasure and the fact that we need to experience pleasure. She gives us permission and homework to experience pleasure. And this relationship between the sex and the stress hormones. And I'll just point out, if you want more on that, you might want to check out episode number 89 with Dr. Nathan Riley, where we talk more about women's health care. It's an excellent episode. It's actually a perfect complement to this one because he's also an OBGYN. Although Susan's not an OBGYN, but he's an expert in women's health and birth and midwifing and home birth. He's also an expert in hospice. So Susan and Nathan have a lot in parallel, but there's more on that episode 89 with Susan. And episode 80 with Dr. Mario Martinez, where we talk about the importance of cultural portals and the expectations that we have in our cultures in determining our life experience. So that one is also directly related to this episode. And lastly, I asked Susan about sex education for our children, our youth and teenagers, and how Hollywood and pornography has given the younger generation a complete wrong idea about how sex is supposed to be, should be, can be, and what really healthy expression is. And Susan gives the good news. You know, menopause is a time where we can really self-actualize and share our gifts with the world, as Susan states. It is a time to own your power, ladies. It is a time to not apologize for your wants, needs, and desires, not to silence your voice, to live your truth, and to blossom your gift to the world. So get a nice hot cup of tea, put on some nice cozy socks, warm up to the fire, and join me for this beautiful discussion with Susan Wilson. Susan, welcome to the show, and tell us, what is the main thing you learned from writing your amazing book, Making Sense of Menopause?
Hi, Amy. Thanks. I'm really happy to be here. What I learned from writing it, I suppose, is just to keep focused, to check in quite a lot with women and make sure that what I was addressing is what they wanted to hear. So I've had a practice for quite some time now, 45 years, and the last 20 years of that have been working with women in the menopausal transition. And I noticed quite a few things, and I just see the way we tend to pluck menopause out of everything else that happens in our life and make it something that's just itself. But our life is a continuum from womb to tomb, and everything connects, and we don't tend to think about that. I've always been in awe of human bodies and all of the systems that are working together and doing what they're supposed to do and working in concert with each other, and nothing being in competition with another system. Our body's always trying to move toward health. And we tend to, in medicine these days, really compartmentalize everything, have a doctor for every part of the big toe, the hands, the feet, the organ systems. And nobody's really looking at the cause of health anymore, or looking at how everything connects together. And so it was really important to me to write a book of context. I had clients asking me quite a bit if I would write something, because I was able to explain things to them in a way that they could take in and understand, to simplify it and not to get into a lot of jargon. And so that was partly to want to do what was being asked of me, but partly also just to somehow convey my real awe of being alive and of our bodies, and how we come in with purpose, and everything that happens has purpose to it. And so I wanted to connect menopause to the rest of our lives, so that we could see that it's not something that just happens to us at some point that we need to be afraid of, and oh my God, it's coming, what's it going to be like? But that it literally is a process that starts when we're forming in the womb, and each phase that we go through sets the foundation for the next one to come. And so I wanted to write a book of context, because I also noticed that when you would look online, what's out there in terms of menopause books, most of them in this day and age are diet and workout books, to try to keep from aging. So, you've got the menopause diet, you've got the keto diet, you've got this, power workout thing. And women are at such a disadvantage in our culture, the myths that we absorb about ourselves and this time of life. So don't know if that answers your question, but
oh, it sure does. And there's so much in there, so much richness. And I think a lot of the origin of a lot of what you're saying is because in the current modern day and age, we have lost our normal rites of passage, right? We've lost these initiation periods that women and humans, for that matter, have had since the beginning of time. The big rites of passage, the birth, the first period, first time you have sex, labor, childbirth is a rite of passage. And then, of course, menopause. And I'd love to have you speak about these. And then, of course, death. These are all big rites of passage that in our modern culture, we don't have the wise elders and the cultural respect of a system, broader system, that teaches and reveres these stages of the human life and how significant they are, not only physically, but emotionally and spiritually significant they are for our soul's progression, to acknowledge the inherent lessons in each one. So we totally miss all that. We tell girls, if they're told anything about their periods, oh, it's the curse. and then, you know, just pop a tampon in and go do your soccer practice and do everything you normally do. And, you know, it's like this whole thing that's not revered at all. And then, of course, menopause is dreaded. It's like the time when, you know, one part of your life is over. You can no longer produce children. So it's considered, in my mind, spiritually almost like a death, like the death of your value, because now you can't even produce kids anymore. So truly, really, what good are you other than being an old granny knitting a sweater, type thing? You know, so there's no respect culturally of these transitional periods, and hence this leads to misinformation, a lot of pain. So do you want to comment on that? I know I just threw a lot at you.
Yeah, I'll try to. You're absolutely right that we're missing our signposts along the way, and a lot of that is cultural. And we are in a culture right now that moves very, very fast. We're supposed to be available 24/7 all the time, and put one more thing on our plate all the time. I think a couple of things popped in while you were talking. One being, we used to learn from our elders in terms of stories. You know, we would tell our stories, and the elders were the ones that kept not only the stories of our communities and our tribes, but also, you know, back in tribal culture, women would generally bleed together because they were in the same, you know, cycle of light and dark, and that has a lot to do with it. And young women, once they got their periods, would go hang out with the older women, and, you know, like the red tent or something like that. They would be, in many cultures, separated for that period of time. And that's where they began to find out what it was to be a woman, and to hear other elders talking about the life of the community. And in many cultures, for instance, getting your first period is a community thing. It's celebrated with the community. The fathers have a lot to do with creating the ceremony for the young girls, whereas in our culture, while most girls would say they feel like their father ought to know that they've gotten their period, they don't really want to tell him, you know.
No
and
way.
It's considered a bit shameful, and
Embarrassed.
we just layer in our culture shame upon secret upon secret, even things that, you know, we know are not shameful. Culturally, it's looked at as being less than somehow. You know, for instance, if you look at the way our culture shames women's bodies, you know, what we put up as our ideal beauty are usually, at this point, they're down to teenagers, 14 and 15 years old, being dressed up as adults, airbrushed even so. Very young women are starting to have what, as they call it, work done. And really only about 3% of women have a body type that's even close to that. And yet that's what's being put up as our cultural ideal of beauty. So youth is deified in our culture in the West, and women grow up with a sense of shame if they don't look like that. And so, and that's just one piece. Medically, it happens too. Like you said, I was in conventional medicine for a long time before I finally started my own practice, essentially based on what you could no longer get in conventional medicine, which was someone to give you time, presence, hear your story, because that's where it all begins. Our stories
make you feel
are very
safe.
important. Yeah, our stories are very important. And so with this book, what I've tried to do is go back and connect the dots, help women become aware of what their own stories are and what they may have been you know, harboring, keeping secret, not even aware of, because some of our earliest identity comes from the reflection of other people. So I think it's very important to tease out whose voice is that really that told me I was this or I was that, or this is what I could expect from from men, from being a woman, from becoming a sexual being. And if we become aware of that and begin to tease it out, then we can see, oh, this is how I arrived here. Take a look at it, see if it's authentic or not. Because menopause is really a transition that moves us into the creative times of our life. I mean, I really do think of it in a lot of ways like a piece of fruit. And it's when we get to enjoy the harvest and pick that fruit and eat it and savor it, all that has gone into making it, and then take the seeds out of it and plant those for the next generation, the next crop coming along. So there really is purpose to this, evolutionary purpose, as well as all the biological pieces that come into it. And it all is for our growth, our evolution, our health. And it's not looked at that way in our culture. I'm going to be 70 this year, and in my generation...
Wow, that's a shocker. Wow.
So in my generation,
Don't
literally, no, women were going to college sometimes to meet a husband, not to really educate themselves. And our grandmothers were still being institutionalized sometimes at menopause because they were, quote, not themselves, and people didn't really know what to do with that. So, you know, I've got enough history behind me in terms of seeing the way the culture has changed, the way the medical culture has changed, that it just kind of gave me a perspective that I wanted to share so that women could put themselves in that arc and see how some of these myths came about that we take on so readily.
I love all that. I definitely want to get into a lot of what you just mentioned, particularly with what's happening physically at menopause. But I want to share with the audience, there's just so much about your book I love. It's just so full of stuff. And anyone watching on YouTube, by the way, sorry for those that are listening, you can see it here, Making Sense of Menopause, Harnessing the Power and Potency of Your Wisdom Years. It's excellent. It's full of stuff, and you make it really personalized, Susan, which I think is brilliant because it really helps the person really apply it. It's one thing to have knowledge in your brain. It's another thing to apply it to your life, so therefore you can evolve and do something with the knowledge. So bravo to you, my friend. That's FitAmyTV for those people who want to watch it. But one of the many very significant things that you tell us about, Susan, is that the cultural expectations that we currently have are largely negative when it comes to menopause, and they're associated with all the negative things, the bigger picture of the negative associations of getting older. But what I found is the most interesting, like when you think of menopause, you think hot flashes and night sweats and your middle-aged spread and all this stuff that's bad. Like, where do we ever hear anything that's good other than you don't have the inconvenience of having your period or pain of cramps, maybe? And then for those women who don't want any more children, they don't have to worry about conceiving. I guess those would be good. But you mentioned that was really educational for me, was that in societies where they don't have negative connotations with getting older, they're associated with less physical menopausal symptoms, bad menopausal symptoms. That's incredibly important for people to just pause for a second. That in cultures where they don't think of getting older as something bad, and menopause is something bad, for lack of a better term, they actually have less menopausal symptoms across the board. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, because really our thoughts and our bodies are one. There's been a lot of research done, and it's kind of a relatively new science of epigenetics that really tells us that how we feel about something, our perception of our environment, literally changes our cellular and biological processes to adapt to that perception, because at root we are really adaptable organisms. Our bodies haven't changed that much since we hit the planet, but we've been born into very, very different situations throughout even the last 100 years. You know, I look at my mother, and I had grandmothers that also lived well into their 90s and early hundreds. And
Wow.
I would listen with clear minds, so they were able to tell the stories to me. And it just amazes me how quickly things do change. And so we're made to adapt to whatever comes along. And for instance, even in the world today, a baby being born in a sleepy town in the Midwest whose mother's pregnancy was kind of, you know, serene pregnancy is going to be wired very differently than a baby born in one of the war-torn countries right now where stress is extremely high, because nature wants us to be able to survive and to live. So, for instance, our mother's level of stress hormones, from whatever reason, you don't have to be in the middle of a war zone for it to feel like that in your body, and for your body to be responding to stress all the time. That those stress hormones in the mother's body are affecting the baby's brain as it's being wired, because nature wants you to be prepared for whatever world it is you're being born into. So if it sees the world you're being born into as a very stressful one, then you're going to be wired to have a more delicate response to that. You're going to kick into survival mode much more quickly than someone who does not marinate in those stress hormones as their brain is being formed. So you can end up with two women, one wired for stress, for lack of a better word, the other one not so much. And as they move through their life, they could be in exactly the same situation, but one of them would perceive it as stressful and the other wouldn't, because they are more finely attuned to that situation. And because stress is one of the, if not the major factor in what kind of menopause we're going to experience, this can make a big difference. So these are even things that happen in the womb that can affect us, you know, 54 years down the road when we're going through menopause, and we'll find ourselves in a very different situation, because at the time the ovaries are winding down their estradiol production. It never really goes away, but you know, it winds down. The adrenal glands, the fat cells, are supposed to take up hormone production for the second half of life. It's more complicated than that, but simply put, that's what happens. And so the woman who arrives at menopause, having, you know, been in stress response a lot more during her life, will have adrenals that are very tired and cannot catch the ball when it's thrown to them. And things spiral downward, unravel, and that's when you have more symptoms. So literally everything builds, you know, upon what went before. And I think the more conscious we can be about that path and that trail that's led to where we are now, the better we'll be.
See, I love that. There's just so much in there that you just said. I was like taking notes quickly because there was like so many points that I definitely want to like put a big, you know, highlight over. But I think a major takeaway for the audience is to just take a pause and really hear what you're saying, is that regardless of your age, women, it doesn't matter if you're a 25-year-old woman listening or watching, or if you're 60, doesn't matter. Premenopause, perimenopause, no menopause, amenopause, whatever. How you live now is going to determine how you live later. And we don't know what we're going to title this show yet, but it'll probably have the word menopause in there somewhere. And I'm actually thinking of not doing that, although I want to do that because I want to attract the women that need to hear this about menopause, that are struggling right now because they don't have this information. But I don't want to deter the younger women from hearing this message, because to your point, which is so important, how you're living now You're setting up your whole physiology for how you're going to handle the next phase of your life, is what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely.
If you're living in a real revved up stress state, like so many of us are, particularly with the pandemic and everything going on, and all the fear mongering and all the over busy and distraction and never having an off switch and all this stuff that we're not following the natural rhythms and cycles of life, the ebb and the flow, like the ocean, tide comes in, tide goes out, doesn't just stay in, you know? So we're setting up our physiology for complete burnout. And to your point, that the hormones that stop being produced, and particularly estrogen, by the ovaries once you hit menopause, then it kicks down to your adrenal glands, which is another hormonal gland, to then pick up the slack, and your fat, if I have this correct, and please correct me. The fat in the adrenals then produce the estrogen you need to kind of keep feeling good. And if you're completely burnt out and stressed out and your adrenals have been whipped to death like a tired horse, they're not going to pull up the load, and you're going to experience all the unwanted menopausal symptoms. So how you're living now is important. And just to that point, to the woman listening who's like, well, crap, I already went through menopause. My adrenals are fried. Susan, what do I do now? How do I get it back? How do I heal my adrenals or somehow kick my natural body back in so I enjoy the rest of my life? Do you have any advice for that woman?
Yeah, your point is very well made. And in some ways, I'm sorry that the word menopause is in the title of my book, because I really feel like it could be useful to women from 30 to 75, because I really do go through each stage of our lives, what's going on in our bodies, how our bodies work, and, lead up to this. But the other thing, in women that have stopped having hot flashes go, oh, been there, done that, I don't need that anymore. And women who are in their early 40s are thinking, I'm not there yet. But one thing I want to point out in terms of what you're saying is that the lives we're living right now are so stressful, and it has become background stress. Honestly, a lot of women are not even aware of how stressed they are, because all of us as women will just adapt, put one more thing on our plate if we have to, and keep motoring on. And I have had women say all the time, life is a bit stressful, but no more than it ever has been. And I'm doing the same thing I've always done, but then I miss a period or two, and all of a sudden it's like hot flashes, night sweats, my hair's falling out, I'm gaining weight, I can't sleep at night. How can just missing a period or two make all of that happen? And it's not just missing a period or two, it is the fact that the whole system that's supposed to be there to catch the ball isn't. And one thing I really like to highlight for women is that there is good stress and bad stress, but to your body, it's all stress. It's all the same things happen in your body. You can have, you can be living the life our marketing gurus tell us is what we should aspire to, up at 5:30 in the morning, hit the gym before we have our day of work, fueled on our latte, spend the day doing a job that we love or work that we really love, finish up at night, meet friends for dinner, fall into bed about 11 o'clock, and we love our life and we wouldn't want to change a thing about it. But you put that woman next to someone, for instance, like a single mother raising children on her own, or a woman in an abusive, emotionally or physically abusive relationship, and in many ways their bodies look the same. Both of them are in fight or flight all day, a mild version of it. They don't have the downtime to recover. Their adrenals are not getting to replenish. They're kind of running on adrenaline, which feels really good. A little adrenaline into the mix makes you feel more energetic, more alert. But they both are in huge deficit in terms of their body's ability to, pick up and do what it needs to do. And when we're young, we don't really feel it that much, because we still have extra energy from the basic sources. And it's kind of like a bank account. If you're overspending all the time, what the reserve that you have to draw on becomes less and less. So I would say that the big difference between the woman who loves her life and the woman who is in a situation that's, emotionally abusive or scary as well, is that the downtrodden woman carries that epigenetic burden of the trauma, because we do store trauma in our DNA, and we know now that this gets passed down through a couple of generations. They've been able to do studies with Native American populations and Jewish populations to find out even where some of this stuff gets coded on the DNA. So the person that loves their life is not going to carry that because they're feeling happy, but in terms of their bodies at the moment we're talking about, they both carry a significant burden. So I like to have women kind of create what I call a good for me, bad for me list. Just start there in your life and say, okay, what is it that nourishes me, brings me pleasure? Because that's another thing that we really don't have enough of. We're not taught as women to think about pleasure, think about our own pleasure. At least in my generation, we weren't.
Yeah, I didn't mind
growing
either.
up.
Yeah,
So,
and it's the antidote. It's the antidote to
mhm.
stress, that's for sure.
We are meant to experience joy. That's part of how we're made and part of what our time on earth is supposed to be like. And when we do experience joy and experience pleasure, it changes everything in our body. It changes our biochemicals, it changes our neurotransmitters, it changes the field that we live in. And if we're expressing joy, other people come into our field, it affects them as well, because I kind of see us as beacons a little bit. We're here, we're putting out something, and when other people come into that, they resonate with what that is. And there are ways that we communicate with each other that have nothing to do with what we're saying, what we're doing. It's just the field that we live in. So back to your question about how can women recover? You can. It takes a lot longer if you're coming in crisis. And that's why I really want younger women to get the message, to start thinking about these things earlier, because I know the women in my practice that have had the bandwidth to come in early and say, I know this is coming, I want to be prepared, what can I do now? Then you're able to really start where we need to start, which is hearing the stories, beginning to identify what they're bringing with them to this point in life, looking at the lifestyles and being able to tweak some adjustments here and there, help to get their adrenals strong before this happens. Most women are a little low in progesterone as they get into perimenopause, which is why they have some of the symptoms that they do. And stress will pull off of your progesterone before anything else. I mean, nature is always going to prioritize survival over reproduction. So we're made so that our hormones turn into each other as we need them so that we can adapt. And everything, all the sex hormones are based on the cholesterol molecule, with a few little subgroups added here or there to turn them into different hormones. Progesterone and cortisol are very, very similar. They're almost exactly the same. So when we are overproducing cortisol to meet our stress needs, because nature's going to prioritize that survival, that pulls first off of progesterone because it's the easiest change. And progesterone is the progestational hormone, the one that helps with fertility and pregnancy and regular periods, and it's a calming hormone, so it helps with sleep. And that's the first thing to go at times of stress. And though our estrogen falls at perimenopause and menopause, progesterone falls first, and it falls further in relationship to where it was than estrogen ever does, because being female, almost every cell in our body has estrogen receptors. So our body nature is going to want to continue to make sure we have estrogen so everything can function. Progesterone is a little more focused during the reproductive years on reproduction. And since we're not reproducing anymore after menopause, those levels drop further. But that's what causes a lot of the perimenopausal symptoms, and the menopausal symptoms is this lack of progesterone. So stress is just so much the key to the whole thing. And if we can begin to be aware of our stress, whether it's good or bad, if we can start to harness that early on, then we can go through a menopause that is less chaotic, less full of symptoms, and that sort of thing. So I quite often worked with women to get their adrenals in order, get their mindset in order, know what their own stories were so that they knew what their vulnerabilities were to messaging and myths and things like that. And then usually a little support with progesterone. And when women had the time to approach things ahead of time, they sailed through for the most part. Because as you mentioned earlier, mindset is a lot of it. Our cultural mindset is your life is over. You no longer have value because you can't have kids. You're not arm candy anymore. You don't look like the 15-year-olds. And women take that on because we're so used to being shamed and not being listened to. And our stories are so important. And it is so important for a woman to know that she's heard, to have a witness to the story. That's where the healing takes place. And our medical visits have turned into 5 minutes in a prescription, because that's how long it takes to get a code to put in your chart so that you'll get paid. And most women, that the studies they've done have showed that a full 50% or more of women never fill those prescriptions because they're not sure it's the right thing. They know they haven't been heard, so they're not sure they should be doing this. So having someone to hear your stories, and we should be hearing each other's stories, because as women, we educate each other about what pregnancy is like, what menopause is like, what it's like to get your period, whether it's the curse or whether it's, something else. So, and that mindset makes a huge difference.
Well, I'll add too that if we all consider the women that we know in our lives, and just the people for that matter, you don't have to be women, that are really fighting the aging thing, really fighting the getting older thing. And if you look deeper, what in my experience, it's usually those people really grasping and clinging at it and doing all the pills and potions and surgeries and creams and just really, hating the whole getting older thing, the changes that happen. From my experience, are the ones that really haven't done the inner work to develop the next phase of our being, that we are more than the physical. And yes, it's important. And I've talked about this in many of my shows because I've gone through that as, my ex modeling and all that stuff. I get it. I totally get it. And full disclosure, I struggle with it too. I have my moments when I'm, and I'm not as strong, and this doesn't look good on me anymore. And oh my God, look at my butt sagging, and all these different things. Like, this is all happening. But I think the comfort comes when we think about, there's just so much more to me than that. And this is now an opportunity for me to develop other parts of who I am and reclaim all of who I am. And in fact, you talk about in your book, which I love so much, that the symptoms, that the time of menopause can be a time of freedom, confidence, authenticity, and creativity. And in fact, you say, Susan, that it's the intersection of wisdom, creativity that nature actually supports, and is a time for us to give our greatest gift to the world. I'm like, oh my God, earmark that page. Just listen to that, everybody. This is the time that you can go within and find out who you really are as an independent soul. You're no longer a daughter. You're no longer necessarily a wife. You're no longer a mother. You are you. And what is now your gift that now that the kids are out of the house and maybe even you're retired, I don't know, or you have more time, let's say, that you can really cultivate what is the wisdom, the lessons, like you said, the stories that I've accumulated uniquely in my soul path, the good and the bad, that I can now encapsulate and share with the world to help others. And that the grandmothers of old generations were the wisdom keepers, hence the term wise woman. They passed on the teachings and the wisdom to the next generation to help the species evolve. We learn, that's how we evolve. We don't keep repeating the same mistakes, right? Isn't that the whole idea? So
Yeah.
I just love your book mentions that, Susan, that the period of the menopause is a time when we can really own our gift and share it with the world. Please comment on that.
Well, in fact, I would say that is the whole purpose to that. It's evolutionary. We're evolutionary, and it was when women started living past their reproductive years that the human species really evolved. They've been anthropologists, social anthropologists have been looking at this a lot over the last few years. They call it the grandmother hypothesis, that because back in survival cultures, you know, a woman had a baby, nursed it for a couple of years till she became pregnant with the next one, but then her resources had to go to that child that she was growing, and the toddler was kind of left to survive on their own, certainly within the community, but didn't have the mother's attention in the same way. So when women started living past their reproductive years and becoming grandmothers, they could foster those toddlers. They could, collect more food. They could be with them and protect them. And they also held the stories of their culture because they had the time on earth to do that. And as they begin to tell the stories and to know the longer arc, it really woke up a whole different part of the human brain. So grandmothers are evolutionary, and I go, yay.
Woohoo!
And in the only other mammalian species that lives much past reproductive years, a couple of the whale species, they have the same role in their pod.
Grandmother.
Like if there's,
and elephants, right? Elephants have grandmothers that do
yeah, I
stuff for
think
the
they
kids.
do too. I'm not, I haven't read about the elephants, but that makes sense to me, and they live a long time. And, so if food is scarce, they remember the old hunting grounds. They can take their grand whales or grand elephants out and help the tribe to survive. But I think it's also interesting that in terms of giving our gift, we're the only ones that can do that. I think each soul comes with a purpose. We're constructed, if you will, in our DNA, encoded in our DNA to have something to do and something to give. And nature really supports us in this at menopause because, for instance, when we're in our reproductive years, the main estrogen that's running is estradiol. And that's what runs the menstrual cycle. It hits the parts of your brain that make you want to make babies, nurture everything in sight, scan men for their genetic potential when they walk into a room, even if you're happily partnered, coo at babies in the grocery store. And it allows you on some level to become the doormat for your family. You're the nurturer, you take care of everybody else comes first. It's almost like a hypnotic trance. And we wake up from that at menopause as levels of estradiol fall, and then levels of estriol, which is a different estrogen, rise, and they hit the creative centers of our brain. So that's when women start thinking about the gift that they have to give, and start wanting to start that business or dance that dance or paint that painting, write that book, whatever it is that you feel like giving, that you feel is what your passion is. And for some women, and I'd say for quite a number of women, that still has to do with nurturing the family, with taking their grandchildren and helping to nurture them along. And that's a very valid and very important part to play and role to play. And other women tend to want to branch out in a more public way. And if people say, well, I don't even remember anymore what I feel passionate about, I don't know where to go with this, I say, well, kind of think back to when you were 10, because 10-year-olds are incredibly present, smart 10-year-old girls right before the hormones hit. They're very clear about who they are. And so think about what moved you then and start there, but whatever it is, we do generally have more wherewithal, we have more hormonal support, and I hope that we will have more cultural support going forward for doing this. And I think the more women who do, and the more we share our own stories with each other, it's just so critical. I mean, we educate each other as women, whether it's about the traumas of our pregnancies or the traumas of menopause. And I found it interesting always in my work that the stories women tend to tell are the ones where, it was horrible, or the baby almost died, or, that what an awful experience they had at different points in time. And I think that's because we experience so much trauma that we hold on to, even, it doesn't have to be huge, violent, or intentional, but just being marginalized, not heard, not seen, and always being the ones that kind of people walk over on the way out the door. It needs to be told, and it needs to be shared. And often we're hesitant to do that because in our culture, looking good is what you're supposed to do, whether that means you're on top of everything, whether it means you're physically looking good, whether, it has different meanings to different people. And so we tend to put forward this image that, hey, we've got it all together. But I've really found that when women start talking to each other, number one, all of our secrets are the same secret. We're human beings on earth, we're women in this culture, we have often experienced mostly the same things. So things that we keep secret to protect our image, usually everybody else is doing the same thing. And it's incredibly healing to share this with other women and to see that, oh, here we all are. And I'm not going to label myself that way anymore.
Indeed. And, I always say there's more that unites us than divides us. And I think that this is part of the big resurgence in women's circles and the power of sisterhood. I know I have a free online women's circle that people can join wherever they are. And you do great. And, I've never been really like a girl's girl. I mean, I've always had girls for friends, but I was always the tomboy. And that's a whole nother discussion about why. But, we grew up, to be honest, women were competitive, like with each other, the best, who was the prom queen and all this crap, and the prettiest girl in the one with the best clothes. I mean, that was actually in the yearbook, best dresser, best looking. It was never like most completely a mess winner. You know what I mean? Like, most disheveled every day.
Friend,
or who showers the least, like never gets the award, It's that's how we grew up. And, the boys at the time, they wanted to be with the hottest girl and the one that had the biggest boobs the first and all that stuff. So that was kind of in us, whether it was conscious or not.
Right.
And I'm so grateful that now I've lived long enough to evolve from all that into the not only the power, but the importance of sisterhood and time with women. And I know it's a confusing time with all the gender identity stuff and the trans this and the flowy that and however we identify. And I love and respect everybody, whatever it is. But I'm just going to say, in my personal opinion, there's something for being with women with women, and opening up in a authentic, heart-centered way of sharing our truth and the common realizing that how you're feeling is, wow, I thought she had it all together. You know, like she's normal like me. Some days are good, some days are bad. Some days she figures, why am I even bothering? And some days she's like, woohoo, thank you, God. You know, so do you have any comments on for the people watching and listening, the power of bonding with other women in some regard?
Well, just that I think that it helps us to be more aware of, quote, the human condition and the pressures that we're all under. And it helps us to see that we really are, as you said, all the same. You know, I think of it as all our secrets are the same secret. It's really true. And I think that particularly in this day and time when we're being so purposefully polarized, so that people line up behind one ideology or another and identify with that so strongly that we need to hate people that feel differently than us or fight with them or whatever. It's important that we see where we connect and what about us as humans, whether it be in our own culture or in people of other cultures as well. I've always been very interested in other cultures ever since I was a child. And I'm always looking, and I've worked in many cultures, but I'm always looking for what connects us as human beings as opposed to what is different, because I just see that as kind of spice to the basic recipe, that the cultures are somewhat different.
It's a good way to look at it.
But I think it's important that we do that because we are being very purposefully polarized these days. And I think diversity is actually, it's resource. It's a good thing if we're all facing together at one issue, looking at the same thing, trying to solve something, then having many different perspectives and ways of looking at that gives us more to draw on. But we've been very well trained, particularly in the virtual world, to line up against each other, butt heads, see ourselves as different and being against each other in some way or another. And that's a purposeful distraction for any powers that be that want us distracted so that other stuff can be going on. And, you know, whether it's political, ideology, whatever.
Financial.
So, yeah, all of it. So I think it's really important that we tell our stories, that we come together, that we continue to dialogue with people who are different than we are and look for the things that are the same. I don't care how different someone's ideology is to mine. We all want to live in safety. We want to have enough to eat. We want our children to be taken care of. There's so many human things that are the same that we could bond around or work together around rather than, you know, being at odds all the time. If, you know, there's a fire in the neighborhood or something, everybody gets out there, works shoulder to shoulder. You're not asking people, who did you vote for? Did you get vaccinated or not? You know, all of these like things that are just so superficial in a lot of ways that we fight about these days. And there's a quote from Mother Teresa that I really love. And she says, if we have no peace, it's because we've forgotten that we belong to each other. And I think that we really have in this virtual world. As I said, I'm old enough to it wasn't until I was late into my 40s that, you know, you were really getting anything other than, I remember getting the AOL discs in the mail when I had my daughter at 45, and I can plug it in time because I remember nursing her and sitting there and thinking, okay, I'm going to check out, what is this all about? I keep getting them. I put one in the computer. It took 45 minutes to load a page. And I'm thinking, why would anybody want to do this? What's it going to be good for? But 4 years down the road, we had high-speed internet, and it's just been going faster and faster ever since. And particularly during the pandemic, now we're all doing things on Zoom that we used to do in person.
Yeah.
And as an individual, I feel it's very important in my grandmother years, and because I had my own daughter at an age I could have been a grandmother, I'm probably going to be old enough that all I can be is a soft lap for them at that point, if I ever get them. But one of the key things I think that we have to offer is that we're one of the last generations that really grew up without all of this technology. And so we have a different sense of what it is to be present with someone that we're talking to, or to actually write a letter or have a conversation or pick up a telephone, or, you know, it's kind of our job to walk around with young children as they discover their connection to nature, because we're all made of the same thing. We're all part of each other. And so go build a fairy house in the woods. You know, be present in a way that they can know what that is, because it really upsets me greatly to see a toddler trying to get a mother's attention, and she's focused on her phone and not even aware that they're doing that. So I do think that if we women of a certain age do not anchor that in what comes behind us, that it's going to be lost.
Amen. I love that. Susan, everybody put a cap in that. That was so important what you just said. I totally agree. I'm not far behind you generationally, and I couldn't agree with you more. I never thought of it that way, that we're almost like the last generation who remembers life before the phone.
That's right.
Life before the phone. We didn't have phones when we were kids. We didn't have computers. It was like, go outside and come back when it's dark. And it wasn't like, oh God, you might get kidnapped or any of this stuff, which is a very real thing right nowadays, which is another discussion.
What we have today was science fiction to us. In fact, it was comic books. It was Dick Tracy
George
and
Jetson.
his two-way wrist radio, you know?
Yeah.
We're all
of course.
wearing them.
Yeah,
So.
Unbelievable. I mean, and now people have chips in them with vaccines.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. And I know we're getting at the end, but on your daughter and relationships, I thought it was a very important part of your book that I would just really love for you to educate us on. The importance of how the younger generations, particularly teenagers, I've heard that they get the majority of their sex education from pornography, which is not even real. Okay, and not how women work and not how we're supposed to work. But to you, it's very important that you teach your daughter connection with her authentic self. And you talk about how it was important for you to help her learn that pleasure belongs to her. Her pleasure is her own, and it originates with her. And it's not for someone else to give. And that you mentioned that if girls knew their own bodies and their own pathways to pleasure before becoming sexually active, they would not end up feeling that they are dependent on someone else for the way they feel, and that they're somehow wanting because an insecure teenager who is otherwise ignorant deals with their own insecurities by telling so. So this is brilliant. Okay, what is your message to the parents that are raising the younger girls and boys to learn about their authentic self, their sexuality, how sex is supposed to be, not like it is in the 1 hour movie, wham bam, thank you ma'am. You know, what would you like us to know about educating sexuality in reality?
Well, I think it all begins again with being present with your children, really being present with them, being part of their lives, being real, taking the time to be a part of their life. Now, I do see in our culture that Hollywood, I would say for a certain age, and it starts pretty young, that Hollywood is what tells us about sex and what it's like. And yes, it's generally from a male perspective. They don't have a lot of time for sex scenes, so it's usually pretty quick. Everything's heightened and dramatic. which is not always the way it is in real life. And so what I mentioned in the book is that that was one of the last things I tried to screen in terms of content for my daughter as she grew up. Aside from, she could handle heavy emotional stuff if need be, or, a little bit of violence. But I did try to keep the Hollywood sexuality out to whatever extent I was. And we use sex to sell everything. So there's only so much that you can keep out, because I think it sets up unrealistic expectations. And then as we become sexual, we never have an opportunity to know what's real for us, what's authentic for us, what we would even like to be able to experience it or ask for it or create it with a partner. And boys are equally, ignorant in that sense as we grow up. And there is a larger and larger population of young boys that are kind of growing up on pornography, and it literally changes their brain. We know this. So not only does it become an addictive behavior, but it also becomes very unrealistic in terms of what they might experience in a real sexual encounter. And everything seems kind of, it doesn't get the high that you do with pornography. So that's not to say teenagers are going to necessarily be interested in hearing that. And I will say that, when I began to talk to my daughter about these things, it was like, Mom, later, stop it. But I think the message went in, even though, they're interested, but they can't really let you know that they're interested on some levels. So I've just tried to really help my daughter focus on knowing herself, and that I recognize that she's different than me and going to make different choices than I do, and honoring who she is rather than, trying to fit her into any kind of particular social norm. And she's 25 now, and she's a human being, and she's full. And I'm so happy to, see her living the life that she's living. But I do feel that we look too much to other outside sources for telling us what it should look like. And so many women spend their whole time during a sexual encounter kind of self-observing, am I positioned so that I'm not going to look fat, or am I giving the kind of response that is expected of me? And we do need to find our own pathways to pleasure if sex is going to be authentic for us. And I think that's a great thing that happens at menopause. Sex gets better and better, especially if you are looking at what's real for you. And a lot of women do a lot of experimenting at this time of life with things that they would never have thought of before, so it's an exciting time.
And that might be the beauty of like a midlife crisis, or that realization that we all come to if we're blessed to live long enough, that we don't have forever. And that, if I'm lucky, I'll have, another 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever years of good years left to really live, and not just exist, but live. And I better now start living my truth and from my soul and what fulfills me and what makes me happy. So screw it. This is what I want, or not what I don't want, so I think that's a tremendous blessing.
I think one of the mantras of menopause is, if not now, when, and a lot of women feel that. It's like they care so much less what other people think. It's like,
right on.
I'm taking this now. Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of friends that are 40, 50, and 60. And that's a common thing I hear, Susan, is, you know what? I don't really care what other people think, and they find their voice, and they, it's like that, I'm just visualizing like a really older lady, maybe in her 90s, like, at the party, with her martini and just saying what's on her mind, and like, no filter. And it's like, good for her, she's going to tell you how it is. And because I think most women live most of their lives caring so much what other people think, not wanting to offend anybody, and always thinking of others. And I know I call myself a reformed people pleaser because I did it. The first half of my life was for everybody else. I was the martyr archetype. I was the good girl. I wanted daddy's approval and, the whole deal. I did it. I get it. So I'm so blessed that now I can be like, all right, I definitely want to help others, but I want to live too. I wasn't just born to serve everybody,
And the more we start being self-expressed as menopausal women, and I would love to see more images of menopausal women that aren't trying to look like 30-year-old girls with gray hair. When you look in the ads, it's as if you took a 30-year-old, stuck gray hair on them, and that's the way women are portrayed, because everybody's wanting to look and be that younger model again. But there's such beauty in aging and in older women and in that wisdom. And I just hope that we can begin to, as we share as women, begin to express this more and begin to see it more and put it out into the culture.
That's a beautiful sentiment.
To have that reflected back to us, that this is great. What's coming is great.
Yes.
And I really think menopause is a crossroads for women, or a fork in the road. I've seen over and over, it's when women either decide, okay, I'm going to take my life back and I'm going to thrive, or they buy the cultural message that their life is over and they start to diminish.
I love that. And I think you even mentioned in your book, that's really kind of ultimately the choice. You've seen, if I remember reading correctly, I think you mentioned that you've seen women go one of two ways. They either embrace it and take it and run with it and make it their own, or they're paying the price for the life they live, totally stressed out, fried their bodies, and they try to keep grasping to the past and not taking that gift and then carrying the banner into the next phase. So it's ultimately our choice, everybody. And to your point, Susan, as your book lays out, it's never too late. Even if you were the one that was burning it at both ends, there's things you can do now to restore your health, to get it back together so you can start living your authentic self and feel good and like where you're at in your life and embrace it. And, and I'll add too, there's a difference between aging and getting older. We're all getting older, but we don't have to age. And aging, I'll just point people to one of my previous episodes with Dr. Mario Martinez, who's an expert on longevity, and he's a psychonumerologist and a psychoimmunologist, and he talks about the cultural portals and the cultural aspects of aging, and that was episode 80, and how we don't have to accept that, this stage of our age means this is going to happen to me. And to your point, we can be the example. We can be the example. The world needs women that are empowered, self-actualized, own their own sovereignty, and like themselves and are happy with where they're at in their lives. Women need to see that role modeled.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we feel overwhelmed, especially if, menopause sneaks up a lot on women because we're so busy. We keep putting one more thing on our plate. We keep doing the next thing and don't have the wherewithal to be looking into the future. And so more often than not, when I see women, they come in kind of in the crisis of it, having a lot of symptoms and feeling just totally overwhelmed and like everything is falling apart. But and lifestyle, which is what is required often to get the adrenals back in line, are some of the hardest things to change for us. But one thing I like to remind people is it really is all connected. So it's not like you have to get from point A to point B way over there for everything to be okay. Just take one little step from wherever you are, and that has a huge ripple effect. And I've seen this over and over and over again. For instance, women that will just change their bedtime or change a bedtime ritual or not spend an hour and a half on the computer right before they go to bed, which raises your cortisol, makes it harder to sleep. Changing that one thing has such a huge ripple effect on their mood, on their energy, on their adrenals' ability to regenerate everything. So it's not like you have to do a huge thing. Just start where you are. Take one step. You're always on the path, because it's always, everything is connected, and your body wants to work with you. Our bodies
Yes.
are always moving toward health. So, you know, if you give them a little, it'll give you a lot, you know, to keep going.
Boy, you're mirroring so many of my sentiments. I totally agree. Your body wants to be healthy. It wants you to thrive. Your soul wants you to evolve and self-actualize. That's what we're all here for. So learning to read its signals and what it's trying to tell you, not using your mind to override your body and should yourself to death and demands, and following the cycles of nature. I've actually heard it said that the menopausal cycle is actually what's the term? A microcosm of the macrocosm of the cycles of nature. And we can learn how to live according to our menstrual cycle as a barometer to how well we're doing and following our natural ebb and flows. And I love how encouraging it really is, as simple as just one thing, and it's changeable. And then that'll start a cascade of,
Right.
oh, wow, I like you said, computer, not, within 3 hours of bed. What do you know? Now I'm sleeping better. Since I'm sleeping better, I have more energy during the day, so I eat less sugar and less caffeine, and I just don't eat as much, and then I have more energy to exercise. And so it's a ripple effect in the positive. So start with that one thing, and it's never too late.
Right.
Love it.
Exactly. Start where you are.
Susan, making sense of menopause, harnessing the power and potency of your wisdom years. Such an excellent resource. Remember, everybody, it doesn't matter where you are, to start learning, to start taking care of your now, to help ensure a good future for your daughters, your nieces, your aunts, your cousins, your friends, your grandmothers. It doesn't matter. Such an amazing contribution to humanity. Susan, how can people find you? Where would you like to direct the audience to find out more?
Probably to my website, which is makingsenseofmenopause.com.
Mm-hmm.
And on there, I talk a little bit about how I frame this time of life. I post a new blog every month. And if people want to sign up for a newsletter, they can, and they'll get the blog and kind of an article or what I've been kind of thinking about that month, that sort of thing. And that's probably the best place, because there's plenty to read there. And I also encourage people, if there's a topic that they would really like to see a blog on, that they want, I can't take care of individual people's medical issues in that kind of forum, but I'm very happy to write a general blog on a subject if there's something women would like to hear about, and so they will contact me, and the next month or the month after that, I'll address that in the blog setting.
Wow, that's super generous.
Well, I really want it to be a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be a place that people can come, that feels like a place, not just another website that says, click here to be fabulous,
Yeah.
So it's I want information and conversation, and to for women to feel safe,
real time, and in real time. And that's tremendous. I've never heard anyone mention that aspect. So again, such a contribution to humanity. Thank you so much, everybody. That'll be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please share it. Share it, like I said, with your friends, your sisters, your mothers, your daughters, whatever. And it'd be amazing if before you sign out, you leave a quick 5-star review and maybe even type in a few words about why the show might be valuable to you. I would appreciate it. And Susan Wilson, thank you so, so much for coming on Awakening Aphrodite today.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Okay, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Would you like to support my mission to help empower people all over the world to be all of who they truly are? If so, please subscribe to the show, leave a review on iTunes, and share it with a friend. And if you're looking to take immediate action to align your energy and optimize your health, visit amyfournier.com. Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite. Let's awaken her together in you. I'm your hostess, Amy Fournier, and I already can't wait to be with you again and for you to hear what I have planned for the next show.
Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. To learn more about Amy, check out her website, amyfournier.com. That's amyfournier.com. You can also check out Amy's live and on-demand virtual fitness and yoga classes, and sign up for her newsletter to receive a free mini ebook of 3 of her top tips for making holistic health a lifestyle. Again, that's amyfournier.com, and get your ebook sent to your email immediately. Connect with Amy on the daily on Instagram at FitAmyTV, FitAmyTV, and watch many of the podcast episodes and subtopic clips on her YouTube channel, which is also FitAmyTV. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time on Awakening Aphrodite.